Good afternoon, 7th grade Bobcats. Mr. Flato here. Welcome back to another great week at the Helena Middle School. On today's Bob lesson, sat down and Miss Gluckert and I talked about a topic that seems to pop up a lot in 7th grade moving into 8th grade. Seems to take up a good portion of our time, and I think it's a very important topic. It's a topic that students really can benefit from learning more about processing. There's not necessarily a class in school about how to handle some of these situations. And that topic is when students' feelings go from platonic to romantic and wanting to try that thing on. So sat down with Miss Gluckert. We kind of shared some of our thoughts. Think this is developmentally appropriate time for this. So here you go. Here you have it. I hope you have a great week. All right, Bobcats here with Miss Gluckert. We're teaming up on this week's Bob lesson. Feels like springtime of 7th grade is a good time to talk about relationships, but also maybe relationships that go above and beyond friendship. And that is the dating thing that some kids feel like when they get into middle school, something that they maybe want to explore. I know it ends up being a topic of conversation down in our neck of the woods every single year. And I think from my perspective, I would say that it's a natural thing for kids to start feeling and having deeper feelings about one another and wanting to explore the dating thing.
Yeah, I'd say that. Kind of one thing that comes up for me is how, sometimes I talk to kids in middle school and they're not ready to date either. So there's kids who are really into it, and that's something that they're wanting to try on and explore. And then on the other side of that, there's kids who, for whatever reason, that's something they're not interested in. They don't want to do that. They want to wait, or it's just kind of not on their radar. And I just want to make room for that and normalize that a little too. Of there's such a big span of development going on in middle school. Some kids are really wanting that, and some kids, they're really not.
And so my takeaway is however you feel, and then that's a good thing. And being true and honest with yourself about how you feel, I think, is the most important thing. I think when it comes to dating and relationships, it is very much a trial and error thing. I talk to students about, there used to be an ice cream place in the mall called Baskin Robbins, and they had 31 flavors. And, the dating thing for a lot of cultures, a lot of people, is trying to find that one person that maybe you have a family with someday or you end up with long term, if that's your thing, and going into the ice cream store, and maybe that you've never had ice cream and you get chocolate chip. And the next time you go in and maybe you are like, well, I like the chocolate chip, but what about the chocolate chip mint? And not that human beings are ice cream, but dating and having different dating experiences, learning about yourself, learning about what you like in a relationship, what you don't like, learning about maybe how you show up in a relationship, your strengths, your weaknesses, just like everything else, it's kind of a trial and error process, which leads to kind of, I don't know, the shelf life or how long middle school relationships tend to last.
Yeah, like the kind of, if you're trying this new thing on, if you're trying relationships on or dating on, I mean, it's in middle school, it's all everybody's growing and developing so quickly, and there's things that they're going to want to try, and then there's things like maybe they change their mind and they decide that that's not for them, and that's okay. And I think that really affects how long relationships in middle school last. Like, I don't know about you, Mr. Flato, but I see them lasting sometimes 3 hours.
Sometimes 3 hours, sometimes 3 days, sometimes 3 weeks. I think it's different for everything. One of the things that I kind of see is like expectations ruin relationships. Maybe you and I have a good relationship, we're friends, and then we decide, hey, like maybe we should try this dating thing. I think a lot of times, just what is the expectation? Okay, we're dating now, and you haven't messaged me enough, or you avoided me at recess, or you didn't hold my hand, or I'm not getting enough attention, and maybe your expectations for what a romantic dating relationship is different from mine. And then because of the expectations, a lot of times I see that kind of ruins relationships pretty quick. And I ask middle school kids all the time, okay, you like this person you want to date? Well, tell me more. What are you getting out of it? Is it just the status? Is it just the knowing that you are special to somebody else? Because dating at this age is very challenging in the fact that you don't have driver's license. You can't go out on dates and have the freedoms, I guess, to go and do a lot of that. So I always encourage students to think about, if you do decide to date this person, what's going to change? And I think a lot of times students, the only thing that really changes is the title, when nothing else changes. And then sometimes the expectations or lack of meeting somebody else's expectations can kind of ruin the relationship. And I think a lot of times that's why they do have a relatively short shelf life.
Yeah. Something that comes up for me is it feels like the same way that middle school feels like it's practice for high school, is it feels like it is practice for a future serious relationship. So you're still learning, with Mr. Plato's talking about expectations, like you're still learning how to communicate those expectations. You're figuring out for yourself what those expectations are. You're learning about yourself and like what your needs are. Do I need someone to text me every day? Do I need someone to text me at night or during these times? And how do I let my partner, the person that I'm with, know that? And is that something that they're going to be able to do for me? Stuff like that.
I think that happens at the same time of, you talk about psychosocial development of identity versus role confusion. Everybody's trying to figure that thing out. Who am I? And I think part of the challenge of that, and also the strengths, what I'm hearing you talk about, you make a great point with, trial and error, and this is how you learn about yourself. But also every middle school student is trying to learn about themselves. They're trying to learn, who am I? What are my likes? What are my dislikes? What sets me apart from other people? What are my values? What are my interests? And I think when you start looking at like some of Erik Erikson's work, it's like you got to kind of answer that question, who am I, before you can next move on to that next stage of intimacy versus isolation. And like, am I going to be with somebody long term, and who that is? And I think, I'm not trying to sound super negative on this, but I think about a lot of how do you really have a successful relationship that's a deeper relationship than just platonic or friendship if you don't know who you are. Like you and I, we were talking earlier, we're basically going to be the same people this time next year. Like we are old, we're in our 30s, 40s, we're basically going to be the same. Kids change so quickly at this age, and what they may like right now might change next week, next month. And that is kind of one of the challenges that goes on with dating this day and age.
Yeah, like I still want to throw out there, like I think we're still developing, we're still growing, but we've gone through that part where we grow. Everybody in middle school is growing and developing really, really fast. And so there's a lot of changes going
on. Final thoughts on this. We talked about a lot of good stuff. I think dating is something that forever will be a thing in middle school. I think if you go back, the reason why, and kind of the puberty talk as well, when you go back generations ago, it was a different time where human beings were getting married really young and having children really young because they needed offspring to work and to produce. And we are in a very different place now in 2024 where human beings have the luxury of growing up and getting into their their teens. But then our hardwire in our brain and in our emotions and things are still stuck back there. And so it's really a tough time. It's like I heard it explained once, our hardwire in our brains and our brainstem is still operating from way back then, even though society has moved ahead. And I think that is part of that, adds to the complexity of feelings versus age versus maturity versus a lot of these things.
Yeah.
Final thoughts from you?
No, I feel like that really covers a lot of what we talked about earlier, getting ready to do this. Relationships are hard and everyone does it at their own pace. And I just hope that everyone stays true to themselves in their own journey of relationships.
You live, you learn. Everybody has relationships that crash and burn. Hopefully you learn from them. I'm going to kind of promote learning yourself, focusing on your schoolwork, your sports, your activities, your drama, your music, focusing on your friendships is a really core way to kind of set up success from the future. And when you feel like you're ready to explore and do that, I think that's a good thing as well. But again, I think I agree with you. It's all on your own timing and honoring yourself and being true to who you are. And then also just knowing how much you can take on in life. Life gets more demanding. When you finish middle school and you get into high school, there's more demands on your time and on your attention. And I think you also have to be very real with yourself. Can you take on another thing and be real with yourself on that?
Yeah, like
Prioritize everything. Jobs come into play. School gets a little more intense. All those things. So awesome, Bobcats. Well, we hope you get something out of this. And as always, we're always available to have one-on-one conversations about this or anything that comes up. And we hope you got something great out of this.
Thanks, guys.
All right, this week's Jelly Bean Question of the Week winners: Iria McNay, Jacob Breen, Cash Neal, Tristan Hill, and Lane Petrie. I did have a couple that I drew that did not have last names on them, so I had to pass those by. Please put your first and last name on them. The correct answer was 78. All right, this week's Jelly Bean Question of the Week. What number is missing from this sequence? We've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 10, 20, 30, 50, 80, the mystery number, and then 210, 340, and 550. If you think you know the answer, get your first and last name on there. Make sure it's legible. Every week I run into this. Tune in next week, see if you're a winner. All right, Bobcats, let's make it a great week at the Helena Middle School.